And we are live. Welcome, everyone. My name is Niki Lopez of Niki Lopez Creative, and you're watching The Circle, where every Tuesday, 8:30 to 9 p.m., I'm sharing stories with the creative community, activists, community, social entrepreneurs, people doing great things in the world today. And today I have a very special guest and friend, Omilani Alarcón. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, indeed. So while we're getting everybody set up online, Omilani is the director and founder of Latinegras. She's also a performing artist and an author. So welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thank you too.
Yes. So Omilani, okay, so I see some people coming in. We are live right now on Facebook on a few places. So we are live on Niki Lopez Creative. We are live on Outclick Magazine. We're live on YouTube and Periscope. So welcome. If you have comments, share the live, share the love. Absolutely. So let's dive in. Omilani, where did you start? Because I know you do a lot of different things. What was your first endeavor?
Oh, my first endeavor. Now, if you want to say when I started, like taking it way back, I started in dance and performing like music and those things. It's like it came out of nowhere. That started when I was about 8 years old. And I came in the living room and I told my dad that I wrote a poem. And they didn't believe that I wrote it. So then they told everybody in my family. There were 11 children, by the way. So 11 children, 3 adults, all of them came in the living room and I had to perform for them. I was so embarrassed and so like shy. That's where everything started. The next week, I was on the stage performing for a radio station.
Wow, that's amazing. That's amazing. So it's like they kind of pushed you out of that shell. That's great that they supported you that way.
They definitely pushed me out of the shell, and they told me that they did that because if I could perform in front of them, I could perform in front of anybody.
Well, was there a difference? Because I think like people you're familiar with, well, I don't know.
You would think you would be used to it, but if you have to get up there and sing or like perform and everybody's watching you, and like I don't know how your family was growing up, but mine, they'll clown you, they'll pick on you and start laughing. So I think my family is a tougher audience than most other ones.
Absolutely. Well, that's great that you have that support, because sometimes people like, oh no, put down the arts and get into something else. So it's great that they kind of pushed you in there, because you do so many things in the creative field.
Yeah,
so that's really amazing.
I grew up surrounded by it for generations on both sides. My family, they're artists, so visual artists, singers, so it was natural. Like art is just like learning how to tie your shoes. Like I'm surrounded by it. It's part of life.
Absolutely. And we have a couple comments. We have G saying greetings and Omilani. We also have someone in the Facebook group. So I don't see the names in the Facebook group, but there's definitely a couple of hugs going out that wave. I just love your name. We met some years ago with the Spoken Soul Festival, the Swan Festival. And I just remember I think you had your book or something.
Yeah, I remember that.
It's like, Omilani.
Yeah, and then had the hand movements that went with it. I remember that.
Yes. And so where did you go from the poetry? Because you started with poetry. How did you transition to the other things that you do?
Actually, before poetry was hip hop. So I was trying to be a MC, growing up, but I went for most of my life. I've been doing hip hop and poetry, but it shifted when I moved to Trinidad. When I moved there, I was staying with a known singer from Trinidad, and one day we were in the kitchen, and this woman, like she's a legend, right? So she sang this high note while teaching me how to cook. Imagine. So she sang this high note, and she said, "Okay, your turn. You do it." And so I started singing in there. She was the first person who told me I can sing. she took me to record in the studios there. So Trinidad was where I made my first studio album.
Wow, that's amazing. We have a question from Cynthia. She says, "What does your name mean? It's beautiful."
It means water.
Ah, okay. What do you know? What language is it from, or the?
It's Yoruba. It's a whole sentence. So it means that what you have in front of you is water. And I was named by my godmother, who is also an Omi. Omi is the word that means water. She's Omi Leye, which means water makes you prestigious.
Mhm.
So, and I got the name in Africa when I lived there.
Oh, okay. And for those who may not be familiar with the Yoruba culture, like, what do you? Can you explain a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so it's one of the indigenous cultures from Nigeria. In Nigeria, you have three main ethnic groups, but so many more. You have Yoruba, you have Igbo, and you have Hausa. When I was growing up, we had the perception that Yoruba meant it was tied in with one's religious or spiritual practices. But it's important for people to know that a person can be Yoruba and be Muslim, Christian, or whatever. The traditional practice is called Ifa, which is a
Mhm.
Christian.
Okay, okay, thank you. I like to always get different perspectives of it. Absolutely. And what's your background? Because I know you have Latinegras, and I know that's also connected to you. So, what can you
Yeah.
share a little bit about your background?
Well, like I come from a family of many, many cultures. We were a house of Black, Puerto Rican, and Filipino children, a big rainbow color. Every time we would have family reunions, we would laugh that it's the United Nations because we had cousins from Jamaica and Trinidad, and then our blend. And yeah, so that's what it is.
Absolutely. And I kind of want to jump into Latinegro, but we do have some people asking about your music. They said, any new music coming out, Omi?
Yes. The music is coming out next month, October 5th.
Well, actually, I guess that would be a great segue because we do have one of your new pieces, and we could kind of throw that out there and play it and come back to it. So let's do that. Cue that up real quick.
Sure.
Liberación en mi corazón. Yo tengo liberación en mi corazón. Liberación en mi corazón. Yo tengo liberación en mi corazón. I got a whole lot of freedom in my heart and soul. And I'm gonna keep singing freedom till my soul get home. Liberación en mi corazón. Yo tengo liberación en mi corazón. My hips sway like a concoction. Don't act like ain't nobody watching. Go figure, yeah, like Ghana. But I'm saucy like the Bahamas. I left a trail of blood all across the ocean. And yes, the scars may burn, but I'm just keeping in motion. Liberación en mi corazón. Yo tengo liberación en mi corazón. And as I rock this world on my bosom, history says that I should. Cause how can we call each other brothers if we turning our backs on one another? Cause they did it in someone, and they did it in another. Cause they did it in Charleston, even in Havana. Liberación en mi corazón. Yo tengo liberación en mi corazón. My smile remembers the hardships. I touch my crown to remember I'm a queen. I got the Haitians and Dominicans are divided. They forget all the struggles I've seen. Cause I left the trail of blood all across the ocean. And yes, the scars they burn, but I just keep an emotion. Liberación
History says that I shouldn't. Cause how can we call each other brothers if we turning our backs on one another? Cause they did it in Ponce, Argentina y Quisqueya. Cause they did it in Panama, the Philippines and Venezuela. Hey, hey, liberación en mi corazón. Yo tengo liberación en mi corazón. I've got a whole lot of freedom in my heart and soul. And I'm going to keep singing freedom till my soul gets old. Liberación en mi corazón. Yo tengo liberación en mi corazón. I left the trail of blood all across the ocean. And yes, the stars, they burn, but I'm just keeping in motion. Liberación en mi corazón. Yo tengo liberación en mi corazón.
Oh wow, that is I love it.
Thank you.
I love it. So we do have a couple of people. Oh, we have someone in the Facebook group saying dope.
Thank
Um,
you.
I know that's right. Fire.
Thank
Uh,
you.
we have Manny from
Hi, honey.
Jacksonville. um, so Gigi's asking for the link, so I just posted the link. Said I love the message.
Thank you.
Yeah. So for those who may not understand Spanish, can you tell us a little bit about that background for that song?
The song is about freedom. Oh, you can step back. You hear me?
A little bit, not too bad, but you know.
Okay. Yeah. So it's about freedom, but it's also saying that part of it has to do with looking at blackness from a diaspora perspective. That's why I said they did it in San Juan and they did it in Savannah. They did it in Charleston, even in Havana. Like if we really look at it, the things that we have gone through as a diaspora, you
Mhm.
know, we have encountered it anywhere we go in the world.
Mhm.
So that's one thing about it. But it's also saying, like I said, I left a trail of blood all across the ocean. That's
Mm.
my ancestors who make some of that salt, you know, that we taste when we go through the seas.
Mhm.
So the fact that we have left this trail of blood all across the ocean and we can still sing and dance and be proud of ourselves today, it says a lot. So that's why I keep singing freedom. We've been through a lot, and you know we're going to keep overcoming all
Mhm.
of the obstacles that we're faced with.
Absolutely. I love that because it's just like it's a beautiful piece. You have an amazing voice, first of all.
Thank you.
But it's a beautiful piece, but it's also educational, you know? And I love that aspect of, connecting the diaspora to Latin, communities, because there's a lot, there's this disconnect for many people. So it's just like, I love that your music and your work brings those two together.
Thank you.
Yes. We have Grecia from Feminine Africa said, thank you, Nikki, for having Omilani as your guest. Such an amazing, multi-talented artist. Love Liberacion and Mi Corazon. Such a catchy tune, great lyrics. Tap my foot the whole time. Gracias.
Thank you. Thank you. And all of my songs, that's why I'm thankful for the background that I had growing up. All of
Mm,
my songs might sound like party songs, but
mhm,
they all have a message that's
mhm.
deeper than just, you know, enjoying yourself. At the same time, you can enjoy yourself to the music.
Absolutely. And so let's dive into Latinegras. What is Latinegras for someone who's never heard of it?
Okay, Latinegras means a person of African descent. Black people, let me clarify with all the things that are going on in today's time, but who have Latino ancestry and African roots.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And so, and what inspired you to start that movement or that organization? Like, what led to that?
You know, the interesting thing is, it's my own personal questions. Earlier, you asked me about identity, but growing up around all of these identities that influence who I am, I really was going to Puerto Rico just to see. My mom always talked about Mayaguez, Puerto Rico, like it's home, you know, like it's like you go there and it's gonna be magical. Life will change if you go to Mayaguez. So I went to see if that was home. I went to see if that's where I belong. I mean, because growing up, I lived in a place where I wasn't from. The only people we had were the people who lived in our house. I didn't have cousins who lived up the street. I didn't have deep roots in the area where I lived. All we had was each other. And in this next phase, since Latinegras, I'm realizing what fragmentation has done to my perception of self. See, a lot of people talk about family and identity as if we all had two grandmothers and two grandfathers, as if we all can trace our family back. I
Mm-hmm.
realized my mother doesn't even know her parents' real name, you
Mm.
know, on my, and I only grew up with one grandparent. So if people see me on Facebook or something like that and might think I'm glorifying my people who look lighter skinned, they're the ones who have the documentation. I
Mm-hmm.
think only once in my life I've seen a picture of my grandmother. So I don't know. I don't know what they look like. I don't know who they are. I can only find myself through the memory
Mm-hmm.
of, you know, through oral history, through the things that you hear from your parents or your siblings and things like that. So Latinegras really was a journey of self-love. But
Mm-hmm.
because I had these bigger questions, have other people gone through what I've gone through? That's
Mm-hmm.
why I interviewed other people to see how they related to this struggle. I never anticipated Latinegras would turn into what it turned into. But just know everything is from the heart and sincere. And I don't have all those answers because I didn't make a marketing plan. I didn't say I'm going to do this in this way. I didn't want to put the documentary in the film festival. I
Mm-hmm.
really have to thank the founder of the festival for encouraging me to
Mm-hmm.
even submit my film because if it weren't for that, it would have never been done.
Yeah, and then you made a documentary. You also received some awards and acknowledgments and accolades for this Latinegras
It's
as well.
surreal because I'm like, I was just trying to see if Maya West is home. And
Yeah.
yeah, and everybody who was in it, like you know, everyone has been very encouraging and supportive. And when we get together, it's beautiful vibes too. I
Yeah.
really enjoy that about it.
What are some of the things that the Latin community or Hispanic community needs to get in your perspective? Like, because I know there's a lot of times people, you know, when you turn on Telemundo, it's not really people looking like us unless they're the maids again, you know. What is it? What can Latinegra do for the Hispanic community as well as the people of African diaspora?
Well, there's a whole section where it challenges these constructions of beauty and normalcy, and this is what a Latino looks like. I started filming Latinegras in 2013. 7 years have gone by, and we're still faced with the same issues.
Mm-hmm.
And what's like very challenging about it is that when we speak out about it, when we raise these questions of colorism, when we say, yes, we are present, we need visibility, especially now, Hispanic History Month. Where
Yeah.
are we? You know, where do we fit into this? So the
Mm-hmm.
struggle is not over. You know, that's why these kind of films are important because it raises this issue. But there's also in the middle of the film a section where I get at the root of where some of these uh, systems of colorism were developed.
Mhm. And I love that is, because a lot of times people may be familiar with the conversation about racism, whether they want to address it or pretend it doesn't exist, it does. But then people don't understand those other nuances within that and colorism. And I think that's, also being Afro Latina myself, that is something that's also very personal. I'm in Miami, or, and I meet other Latin people in particular, and they're like, "Oh, Lopez, who got married to somebody?" And I'm just like, "Y'all know we exist, don't you know what I mean?" And sometimes it's really frustrating. Or if you have like some of my families from Cuba,
Yeah.
and there's and there's some parts of Cuba where they pretend that there's not racism, but I had a great grandmother that was put in the back of the house when family came over because she was of a darker complexion. And so, or you have Cubans who may have be a darker complexion, but they don't want to associate with being black.
Mhm.
So
Yeah, and that that has been going on for ages, but people brush it under the rug under different names. So
mhm,
sometimes I'm sure people have frequently heard it's not colorism, it's classism, it's an economic thing. But
mhm,
economics is also tied in with race, with color, with all of the above,
mhm,
because who was given free labor
mhm,
for all those years?
mhm,
How did a Rockefeller become a Rockefeller? How did, all these people amass so much wealth? It was because our ancestors were kidnapped. And
mhm,
it's even embedded in the way people talk. We have to decolonize thinking, education, school systems, and all of it.
yes, absolutely. We have David Muir saying "Hail Omilani." And David, I don't know if you know, he's opening up the first Caribbean museum. So he's
Hmm.
been looking for donations and endowments and things like that. So all of the Caribbean islands. He's definitely, so it's definitely something, someone to connect with. Um, do you ever come across, what are some challenges with talking about Latinegra, Afro Latina people?
Mm. God, talking about us to who? Because depending on who the audience is,
Yeah.
there are different challenges.
Okay, well, is there a different, what are some challenges in talking to other Hispanics or Latin community, or maybe some challenges in talking to Black people?
One thing that I am really trying to work hard, even within myself, to change is how, thank you, is how um, sometimes we can be tokenized. Sometimes it can be, okay, let's get this one to talk about this, but we don't get, people don't want to pay us. People don't want to, honor us in the way that we should be honored. What is real representation? Representation is not just having a black face in this group of people, but it is also having them have access to power, to resources, and to, the same things that other people have access to. So it's not just about being there visibly, but it's also about being there when it comes to influence.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you,
So
Boo.
always love how passionate you are about let's being Latinx. Yes, absolutely. So yeah, being there, being visible, absolutely, absolutely. So you're also an author as well. Can you talk a little bit about some of your work?
Yes, a lot of my work has dealt with the African diaspora, with Caribbean women writers. I also did a book called Rewriting Oshun and the Politics of Gender, Race, and Sexuality.
Oh,
Um, yeah, because when I grew up, the way that Oshun, who is supposed to be the divinity of love, beauty, art, culture, the way she was constructed in the United States was a light skinned mulata who had children but gave them away to Yemanja, the motherly one, to raise. So Yemanja, who was the mother, was always depicted as like a mammy figure, very dark skinned, very, uh, obese, right? But when I went to Africa, it was the opposite. That
mm,
Oshun would never give away her children. She was a protector of children. She was a dark skinned woman, a mermaid, and she defended all children. So I thought that was interesting. What was it about a construction of beauty and femininity that translated across the ocean, that instead of being a dark skinned woman who took care of her children, she became a light skinned woman who didn't like to work and always gave her children away? So I
Mm-hmm.
think that was an interesting dynamic.
Mm-hmm.
That was my first book.
That, yeah, I'd love to. Where can people find your work if they're trying to connect to your work or buy one of your books?
hmm I'm gonna put that back up on my website. I took it down for a while because when you do all these different things, like I didn't want to have a confused identity. Are you an artist? Are you a filmmaker? Are you an author? But now I'm realizing it's
Mm-hmm.
okay to be all three. So I'm gonna put it back up on my website.
Mm-hmm. And I relate to that challenge as well because now I'm stuck with like three or four different websites because you know um getting into being an artist, some people feel like, oh, you can't have a website if someone's looking about your work for an art show. You can't show that you're also a graphic designer because they feel like if you have all these different things, you're not taking these things seriously. But then there's some of us where we're passionate and actually working in all these different things, and we should be able to own that space in all of the things that we do.
hmm I
So,
definitely agree. Why should we limit ourselves?
hmm hmm I get. Oh, I don't know if that's a question or a comment, but Jess is asking about colonization.
Oh, in the book, I guess is what I'm thinking she means.
Okay.
Colonization, whew, my thesis. When I went to school and did my thesis, it related to that. And it might shock some people because I was talking about I have a chapter called "What is Africa to We?" Like what do we like? What was happening in Trinidad at the time is that a lot of people were coming from Nigeria to teach us the authentic African way. And I was saying, well, what we've been doing all this time. We're a combination of all these different things. It ties in with colonization, though. And
Mhm.
where the colonization comes in is that some of these remnants of British colonial occupation also influenced some of the spiritual practices and way people look at gender roles, the way that people look at certain other practices that have been passed and handed down. I mean, I could get
Mhm.
into these things, but it might take a long time. But
I
yeah.
did read or hear about that somewhere that that the Yoruba culture, the fragments that was brought over to the U.S., um, it evolved into something so different. So when you go back to the motherland, the Yoruba culture or the traditions, it's some of the stories are very different from what we know, the little that we know, because the enslaved, they were trying to really hold on to those cultures, and while they're being fed Christianity. And
Mhm.
so it's just interesting how those things evolve. And
Yeah, it's very interesting. But the other thing we have to keep in mind is that we're comparing it with the Yoruba that was brought over in the 1700s.
Mhm,
No culture is static, so things have changed since the
mhm,
1700s, 1800s. So some of these are old practices, and some of the things that have happened over there have also been influenced by everything from technology. There was a time when you had to sit down with an elder, and for information to be transmitted, it either had to be in person or it would take a long time for this knowledge to go from person to person. But in today's time, I could just Google it. So you have access to a ton of information. So
mhm,
all of those things influence how we construct the things that we live by daily.
mhm. And just saying whitewashing and demoralizing
Yeah, do I
titles.
need to have a private chat with you?
Yes, yes.
No, that's real, but not just in the context of Oshun and all of those things. A lot of things about us have been whitewashed, and we have to look at some of these realities. I used to get upset, even, in terms of me. That's why when you ask me about identity, I'm really, really sorting through that right now, because you have to acknowledge what you really bring to the table. And I've been thinking about that regarding uh, Latinegras as well. I remember going to Colombia. Colombia totally shifted how I see race and
Mm,
how I see what we call Latinidad or Afro Latinidad, because I remember going into this office of Senoa, and in Colombia, and if nobody opened their mouth, I felt like I was back in Durham, North Carolina. Like, everybody looked like people who I grew up seeing, not the perception that you would think a Colombian would look like or anything like that. I got way off. I don't know how I got off. I don't even know where I was taking this. Oh, I know what it was. But when I went there and I was interviewing them and I was talking with them, we had a real conversation about what we bring to the table. So they were saying to me that for me having my complexion and my mixture, I would go in some places and be perceived differently from other ones who had straight African features. I didn't want to hear that because I grew up pro black, pro, pan Africanist. Both of my parents are pan Africanist. So to have to confront the reality that we might have some different lived experiences
mhm,
because of the very same colorism that we fight against and
mhm,
talk about. You have to look at it. You have to look at it in the face,
mhm.
So
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, I think that's, it for me, that's connected in some ways, like when people talk about privilege, white privilege, any privilege, able-bodied privilege, we all have certain privileges. And
Hmm.
so to really dig in and address these concerns on a holistic thing is going to cause us to look at those privileges, look at those things that we may feel like, well, I that's not me. And it's like, no, it is you. So, like understand it, like, okay, this is how I'm perceived. And how
Hmm.
can I use that to push the dialogue into, better conversations or better understanding of, the Afro Latina community, or, Africans that were in Latin America, because a lot of times people have the stigma, like the boat just went one place, so it's all looking at those different privileges, and and like owning those, and like, okay, so that's my privilege, what's your privilege, what's your, let's dive in, let's get to work.
Yeah. But then at the same time, it's like, yes, that's important. But sometimes I'm like, things, the outside world and all of the red tape sometimes can really like drive you up the wall. Like, okay, am I not supposed to say anything right now because I'm light skinned? Sometimes, yeah. But then if something is in me, like I lead first through the ancestors. If they tell me that this is what I'm supposed to do, I take up that fight in that particular way. And not everybody will understand it, but you can't please everybody.
Mm-hmm.
So, I can't say I'm not going to be pro black. I'm not going to be grounded in my culture because I might not look like what you think I should look like. So there are realities to it. I don't know how to take it sometimes because it's such a nuanced thing. I don't think that there's a dictionary, I mean, encyclopedia or whatever. I don't think that there's a textbook definition to some of these things, but there are some realities. I
Mm-hmm.
don't think the Rachel Dolezals or the, what's her name, Jessica Kruger's, or the other homegirl who just was full Italian and Sicilian
Yeah.
claiming softness, like, okay, now that's different.
Yeah.
When you're talking about diaspora people who grew up with Black consciousness,
Mm-hmm.
I think that we don't have time to paper bag test right now. Like,
Mm-hmm.
we have to join together because there's a lot of obstacles against us.
Mm-hmm.
People are still having this perception that Black just means born in United States, and who's not born in United States is a whole different. We are different culturally,
Mm-hmm.
and in some ways, some ideologies perhaps, but we
Mm-hmm.
still one diaspora. one people.
Absolutely. I think the more we adapt that type of mindset, because I feel that part of keeping us separate is divide and conquer. If we could get the American blacks to think that they're this and they could feel different than the other black people in other countries, then that helps us to not get to that unified front of what we need to do to address things on a more global, a larger scale.
Hmm. And it's not our fault.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't choose to get in this situation.
Mm-hmm.
It is systemic. It is
Mm-hmm.
things that we've been fed, maybe even for generations.
Mm-hmm.
So, of course, people would think like that. But
Yeah.
the thing is, once you take consciousness of it, you have to begin to decolonize and deconstruct the misinformation.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I love that you're like sharing while you're on the journey, like your personal journey, and you're like, hey, I don't have all the answers, but I'm
Right.
gonna share with y'all along the way. What can you tell someone who maybe just starting that journey, or they haven't, even started the journey? They don't know, where would they start? Where can they start?
You start with your heart. I think that's why people connect with Latinegras. I didn't do this to impress anybody. Even the channel that I have, the Latinegras, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just putting things I like. I mean, I'm not exaggerating at all. You work with your heart, and
Mm-hmm.
those who feel that will join you on the journey. So that's the advice I would give to anybody. You're not in competition with anybody. Somebody else succeeding doesn't take away from you succeeding. And after you start with your heart, the second thing I would say is have no fear,
Mm.
and just trust the journey, because there are times when things will look bleak. That's how I ended up being in Latinx. Nobody would talk to me for the
Yeah.
first 2 years. I was like, I can't get anybody to interview. So then I started interviewing myself, and then the next thing I know, I had to turn away some people. So
Mm. And we have a couple of comments we have from the Facebook group. The misinformation is tough to go through.
yeah.
Absolutely. And we have Tamika Omilani.
Hey,
I just love saying your name, by the way.
at the house.
And Shani saying, start with your heart.
That's
Absolutely.
great.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
And I think that's a great place to start, because you have to, especially going inside. Um, Definitely. Oh, she has loved the conversation, Nikki. I'm glad that you love it. Absolutely. So, there's people that's live. We're reading the comments off. Definitely, please consider tagging and sharing this video with your networks of people. There's many people. I think for me, like, because I have Jamaica, Panama, Cuba, and like if I'm around my Jamaican side, sometimes they're like, "Oh, the Panamanian one," or I'm around the Panamanian Jamaican one. So it's just like when I came became aware of like what you're doing with Latinegra, it's just like for the first time feeling seen and understood, like. And then yeah, I don't speak. My mother's side speaks Spanish. I don't speak Spanish. I understand it subconsciously, but it's just like to be seen, and that goes back to visibility and representation. When people don't see themselves in the world, or people who have those questions are not able to connect to other people who say, I have those questions too, or guess what, I got the answers. And so I think it's a beautiful and powerful thing that you're doing to like to share and like and be vulnerable. Like, I don't have the answers, but come on.
That's it, and be real about it.
Mhm.
Because some people do feel like, especially if they have attained a certain level of success, they feel like they have to get up there and be the expert. And I
Mhm.
think that's a big thing that's wrong. It's okay not to know. Just
Yeah.
be real. I mean,
Mhm.
that's what you get with me.
Absolutely, absolutely. What's next for you? Are you working on any new projects? I know you have the music that we just heard, which is
I
great, but
have new music, and it's still about this journey. I might as well say it here so people don't get tripped out. Like, what? But I'm digging into my Filipino roots, because that's the only part of my roots that I have ignored in life. And
Mhm.
I think part of it is because I had contention with
Mhm.
being Filipina as well. I never hid it. you know, all this time on my website it has said Afro Filipina. I never took it down. But I'm taking it face on, and I'm learning some things. Like one thing people notice about me is how colorful I am. I love colors. And when I started learning about the south of the Philippines, which is where my family is from, they dress just like me. Like the head wraps they wear look just like mine. And the colors, the bright colors, I was like, I could just jump there and live there and be all right. It's
Mhm.
that we never know where we connect or where we draw our strengths from. And
Mhm.
those are my ancestors too. And
Mhm.
part of them is in me too. Part of them guides me too. So I try to love and respect my whole self. So
Mm.
the next journey, I'm singing in a new language.
Wow.
I still like it. I got some trap music in Filipino language. Yeah, so I tried to make it interesting and fun. So
Filipino trap music.
Filipino trap music. Yeah, yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
I gotta hear that. Absolutely. How many languages do you speak?
Six.
Wow.
Yeah, I grew up surrounded, with language. I started when I was young, so I think that helped.
Hmm.
Yeah, and I just have added on. I had a love for languages and
Hmm.
cultures all my life. Yeah.
Absolutely. Oh, and we have Shani saying we gotta honor our
We
ancestors.
do. We
Yes.
do. We do because they survived because of the choices and things like that they made. That's why we're here today. And sometimes, if you listen, see, I'm so thankful that I grew up with my culture because
Hmm.
growing up with my culture gave me a strong sense of myself. It made me feel like I could never fail. It made me read the history books in school and know that it was just his story. Because when I was at home and when I was in my community, there was a different education that was going on. And that
Hmm.
was very empowering. I could
Hmm.
never doubt myself because I had a strong community that
Hmm.
was behind me. And one of the things that I always knew, and I'm not even talking about just community, my grandmother would tell me, you have a problem, you call on your great grandmother. Like I grew up with a strong sense of ancestors. So I know I'm never alone, you know.
Hmm.
So that's who I give honor to. So even if people don't understand what I'm doing, they're like, she's Boricua today, tomorrow she's from Sambonga. What's going on?
We have a comment. G said, uh, "You need to do a family DNA test to find out if she has any more info about her family."
Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm still a little skeptical right now of
Yeah.
DNA tests
Yeah,
because
me too, actually.
I
Yeah.
don't know.
I'm curious, but my skepticism about those tests and where does that information goes.
Right.
Yeah, so I feel the same way. And then I do see that Gigi sent a comment. She wants to send you a friend request so you'll
Mm-hmm.
be able to share. That's when you were doing the music on her Facebook pages. So
Yeah, sure. I'm just
absolutely.
Omilani. I don't think there are too many of me
Yeah.
like Omilani. If you just look it up, yeah, Omilani Alarcón. That's me.
Yes, yes. How can people support your work, support Latinegro? What type of things that people could do to help further that movement?
So to help the movement, I'm still sorting out the screenings and things like that. There are things that I don't know. I was thinking of putting it on Amazon, but I'm sorting out these things right now. But yeah, you can donate. You can have a talk, and Nikki was in it too. So
Yeah,
we can do panel discussions. If you need the scholarly aspect, I have a background in that. So just look me up on my Instagram or my web pages, and then we can start a dialogue about ways that you can help.
awesome, awesome. Well, Omilani, it was great talking with you, connecting with you. It's been forever. I have to see you in person
I
sometime.
know. Yeah. And
So,
I'm happy to see so many people like G and David and Manny and
yeah,
Dr. Hobbs. I'm so happy to see all these people on here that I haven't seen in a long time.
Yes, absolutely. How are you handling with the whole pandemic and everything?
Wow, it's like I'm creating, I'm working, but I think it's I think what I can't watch the news sometimes.
Hmm.
You know, I think it wears down on my head and has me a little frozen sometimes.
Hmm.
Where I don't know, like it's tough dealing with all of this. I don't know what's gonna happen in November, but boy,
Absolutely, absolutely. It's such a pleasure to catch up with you. Thank you for sharing your music, your um, all the information, your journey, your personal journey. I think there's so many people that relate to it because of that vulnerability and because of just being open and to share. And it's definitely a lot of information to take in and process. So. Um, Thank you so much for being here. For those who are on the live, thank you for being here. For those who are going to watch it early, on the replay, please consider sharing it. Thank you for watching it. If you want to find out more about Omilani, you could go to either one of the she has two websites. She has Latinegras.com. She also has Omilani.com, and you could find her on Instagram and on Facebook, and you're on Twitter as well. So definitely catch up with her. If you like this program, The Circle, is brought to you by Niki Lopez Creative and What's Your Elephant. So, What's Your Elephant is a movement that uses the arts to create safe spaces to talk about everything unspoken. So, you could go to the website, what'syourelephant.org, to learn more. We have a show up. There's going to be a virtual art chat this Friday. So, you can find out that information on Facebook, Instagram, the web, all of those things. Omilani, again, thank you so much for being here. And I will catch up with you another time.
okay, and I'll send you a link so people can download Liberación for free.
Oh, absolutely. Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. I'll put it out on my the page, the Nikki Lopez Creative page. Absolutely. So I will see you all next week. Thank you so much. Good night.
Good night.